So good afternoon, everyone. In lieu of the recent appointment of the Pope, I thought that I would give a confessional today. So I've been a professional futurist for 9 years, and I'm really proud of my career, but I often lie about my job. Now, I don't mean any ill intent, but I travel a lot, and I'll meet people on airplanes or in airports, and they'll casually say, "What do you do for a living?" And I look them straight in the eye and I lie. I go, "I'm in marketing." And the reason I do this is because there have been countless times when I was honest. And I said, "I'm a futurist." And they snickered. They kind of gaffed. They teased. They said, "Where's your crystal ball? Can you deal some tarot cards? And how about the winning numbers to the Powerball lottery?" And I try to say, no, I'm not that kind of futurist. I am a futurist. I don't predict the future, but I try to help lead discussions in terms of long-term planning and strategy. And that's usually followed up with a little bit of suspicion and contempt, and they'll go, "Well, how'd you become one?" And I've been asked this question for the last 9 years, and I haven't found a really clean-cut answer, because I'm still not sure exactly how I got from there to here. But what I thought I'd do is share a little bit of my journey with you today and give a few confessions along the way. So the first of which is, nobody says when they're a little girl, "Someday I hope to be a futurist when I grow up." Technically, I'm a global consumer trends and futuring manager for Ford Motor Company, but we'll use futuring just for the shorthand today. But that wasn't within my scope. That wasn't my dream. My dream was to be an artist. Not just any artist. I wanted to be a cartoon artist. And what I secretly really aspired to do was to take over the Peanuts cartoon when Charles Schulz finally hung up his pens. So I practiced my drawings of Snoopy and Woodstock. I didn't master the rest of the cast, so it's a good thing I didn't get that job, because it would just be stories about Snoopy and Woodstock. But my second confession for you today is that I didn't have the courage to follow my dream. Now, don't get me wrong. I came from a really loving household. I have two great parents, but my parents grew up in the wake of the recession. My dad's education never went past the 8th grade. And my mom was extraordinarily bright. She skipped 2 grades, but went to college only part-time when she was in her mid-20s and got married and had 6 kids. And so she never finished her degree. And most of my life, what was taught to me was financial security. It was so important that you figure out a way to be financially secure. And I remember this moment as if it were yesterday. I was driving along a major highway in Michigan, and I'll say for Andy's benefit, it was I-94, Kaju exit ramp outside of Detroit. And there was a man who was likely homeless, selling carnations out of a bucket. And my older brother said to me, "You know, if you study art, you better be prepared to do that, because there's no money in it." And I believed him. And so I went to college. I went to Michigan State University for undergrad with no thought about what my aspirations were, what I dreamed of. What I went there was with a mindset of, how am I going to get a job? What do I need to study in the next 4 years that will ensure my employment? Now, I'm a child of the 80s. And so I went to undergrad, and I said, okay, maybe I'll study business. And as I considered all the options, I picked finance, not because I have any sort of burning desire for numbers or any affinity for math. I thought, well, that's the most specialized of all the business fields, and so it'll be very marketable. But not so. When I graduated from undergrad, there were no jobs, and so I did what a lot of people did at that time. I stayed in school. And so I went to law school. In 2 years of law school, it was really clear, the writing was on the wall, that that wasn't likely going to be enough. And so I decided to get my MBA at the same time. And I sat for the Michigan bar exam, and I went to Buffalo, New York, where my boyfriend, now husband, lived at the time, to celebrate. And I never came back home. So then I had to sit for the New York bar exam. And so I'd gone through years of education, all this preparation, finally to make sure that I would be employable. And indeed, I did land my first job. My first full-time job was as a secretary. But it was at a law firm, and when news of my passing of the New York bar came through, they hired me as an associate attorney. And so I practiced law. The hours were grueling, 8 a.m. till 10 p.m. every day. Saturdays were mandatory, no vacation the first year. And I practiced law long enough to know that I had made a horrible, horrible mistake. Like, oh snap, what do I do now? And so I said, you know what, I got this business degree. You don't have a backup plan, I got a business degree. I'm going to see if that will take me somewhere different. And so I wrote to Ford Motor Company. I sent them a resume, and I said, please, 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 I hope that you will give me serious consideration for a position in your tax compliance department. I mean, no offense to those in accounting, but I had no burning desire for tax, but I thought it was the intersection, it was the sweet spot of all of my degrees, and that they would find me irresistible. They did not. In fact, what they said to me was, I'm sorry, you didn't graduate from one of the schools that we typically recruit from, nor do you have any sort of significant Wall Street experience that would cause us to make an exception on your behalf. But marketing, they'll talk to you. And so I went through marketing, and I did a series of interviews, and I said, I'm really flattered, thank you for the offer, but I was kind of hoping that I would have this opportunity with finance. And they said, well, if you hire in marketing, you could always switch over to finance. Now, I'm not saying that they lied any more than an Army recruiter is lying when they say they have posts in Hawaii and there is someone who runs a tour for the Pearl Harbor, Arizona whole thing. I'm just saying it's unlikely that it was ever going to happen. And so I found myself working for Ford Motor Company, and I'm wholesaling cars to dealers. So here's my next confession. I'm not a car person. I grew up in Metro Detroit, and I've always admired the brand, but cars aren't my thing. I work with people that declare that oil runs through their veins, that they bleed blue, and that just wasn't me. And so I thought, I'm doomed. This is just short term. I can't, how will I ever succeed if I don't love the product that I'm selling? Because that's business 101, right? You got to love what you're selling. What I found is that I love the dealers. They taught me the business, they taught me about cars, and I think that this is true about all jobs. It turned out to be much more about people than the product. And that worked. That held me over for a really long time. And I was doing quite well. But now my fourth confession. I don't think of myself as an overachiever, but maybe I was overachieving when I hit a midlife crisis at the age of 34. So here's what precipitated my midlife crisis. I have two beautiful daughters. Both of them were very uncomfortable pregnancies, similar to what Kate Middleton has. I suffered from hyperemesis. I took medical leave. Right after my second daughter was born, my father became quite ill, and nobody thought he was going to make it. And to our delight, he pulled through. He came off of life support and lived for about 3 more months and then died quite suddenly. The doctors are like, oh, we didn't see it coming. And what I know is that I was at work, and on my drive there and on my drive home, I cried every day. Sometimes I stepped out at lunchtime just to cry. I was miserable. I didn't know what to do, and I didn't know where to go. So I decided I was in need of a desperate change. And you can do that in a large corporation. And so I said, I need a job that's going to reduce my visibility. I need a place to lick my wounds for a year. Just some assignment, a temporary assignment. And so I took the first assignment that came my way, and that was with the Global Consumer Trends and Futuring team. So I'm now a futurist. And I'm thinking, I can't be a futurist. I don't know. I wasn't born with the gift of foresight. But I would tell you that all of you are futurists too. Each and every one of you try to predict the future. You tried to predict the future when you bought tickets to this event. You tried to predict the future when you got married or took out a home mortgage, when you signed on a student loan or a car loan, when you have children, when you enter into a relationship, when you end a relationship. You do all of those things based on assumptions about how you think the world is going to play out. And so we're all futurists. But if you're with a large Fortune 15 company like Ford Motor Company, you need a little bit more than intuition. And so now I'm trying to help this company figure out long-term planning and strategy. And I joined a team of 8 people that are doing this work. And it's so foreign from what I've done. I feel like we used to say when I was wholesaling cars, it's like being on the front line of the battlefield. And so what I tried to explain to my family, friends, and colleagues that this was so far removed from any experience I had had, it was like standing on the moon, looking down on the battlefield. I had no idea what I was doing. But over time, what I learned is that all of these very disparate degrees, these experiences I had had, these things that I didn't know what they were building up to, made me uniquely suited to be a futurist. So finance taught me the business fundamentals, the MBA taught me business application. Most critically, my law degree taught me how to research. And if you're going to dare to do something that's called trends and futuring, it's easily dismissed as nonsense, a fluff, stuff we don't need to worry about. But law taught me how to build a persuasive case to tell even the most hardened executives, you need to pay attention to this. This is meaningful. This is core to the business. It's fundamental to our survival in the marketplace. So you can't predict the future. In fact, the irony of my title is I spend most of my time reminding everyone you can't predict the future. And so often we make our decisions on a set of assumptions that we never stop to even think about. And my job is to slow down that conversation and say, hold up. What are the underlying assumptions? And what happens if your assumptions are wrong? What happens if everything you believe to be true is incorrect? So we may never be able to predict the future, but there are some areas that we can look to give us guidance. And those are the steep categories. They're social, technological, economic, environmental, and political arenas. These are the 5 forces that will shape the landscape. They're going to shape our values, our attitudes, and our behaviors. The second area that when I was trying to ramp up on how to predict the future, I looked at generational cohorts. And that starts by trying to understand who you are. And before you can understand anyone else, you have to understand who you are and what made you what you are. So for instance, I'm a Gen Xer. So I spent a lot of time trying to understand what was so unique about my formative years that makes me different from a baby boomer or a millennial. So we layer those insights onto these 5 forces. And then we add in a little bit of trends. Now, trends are tricky. Trends are one of those words that it means different things to different people. So to level set this audience, I'll use the definition that I always use. I want you to think about denim. Denim's been in the marketplace for 150 years. In the early 1900s, it was most often used as a work uniform because it was low cost, it was durable. The more you wore them, the more comfortable they became. But they really were the uniform of the working class. But today, denim is high society. You can wear it into the finest restaurants, you can wear it into the most conservative office, you can wear it to a really amazing conference in Richmond, Virginia called TEDx. But jeans are now socially acceptable to be worn anywhere. And over that 100 years, there was some sort of shift in our values, our attitudes, and our behaviors towards denim. And that's the manifestation of a trend. By contrast, styles of denim, high-rise, low-rise, boot cut, acid wash for my fellow 80s friends, those are fads, and they change with the season. And if you're in business, if you're an organization, if you're trying to plan long-term, if the things you're watching are changing really fast, you're probably watching the wrong things. So I'm not going to take you through too many trends. I'm just going to show you one illustration. So one of the trends we talk about in Ford is called information addiction. And I was trying to understand what was happening in culture. And I said, well, you know, we are addicted to information. And there's a reason, the why behind it. It's because having information at our fingertips delivered in a just-in-time fashion allows us to better able to control our environment. We're presented with more opportunities. It allows us to manage time poverty. And we also live in a time of great mistrust. And so we want to scrutinize the world around us. It's incumbent that we do our due diligence. Even in a post-recession world, information can be the new form of status. It is a status symbol unto itself when people seek out your expertise, your knowledge, your experiences. Probably the most interesting element of this is the chemistry. Experts in terms of information say that the brain releases chemicals whenever it receives new information, similar to the same kind of chemicals it releases when you get a reward. And this explains how we lose ourselves on the internet for hours at a time, having no idea how we got there. So I would share this information with designers and engineers, people in IT, HR, anyone who would listen to me. And sometimes people would go, oh my God, that was one of the most interesting presentations I have ever heard. But I've got to get back to work. I've got stuff to do. And so I was sharing these insights, and people said, I don't know what to do with them. I don't know how to make them actionable for me. So we started to write stories, pure fiction about what the future could look like. Now again, these stories aren't designed to predict the future. And so that meant we had to write multiple stories. So if you write a story about economic prosperity, it has to be matched with a story about economic collapse. And what you're really trying to do is explore the bookends of possibilities. And if you can come up with an idea, a service, a product that works in every story that you can imagine, you don't need to know the future. You just know you have a really good idea, something robust enough to weather every situation that comes its way. So when you do this, if you decide to try to do this type of storytelling, you can't begin with the area that's most comfortable. This is the mistake that most organizations make, is that if you're in a company, you might say, well, let's do a SWOT analysis. What are our strengths, our weaknesses, our opportunities, and threats? Well, it's foolish for any organization to think that they own their strengths. They don't. That's determined by the marketplace and can change on the dime. And Ford Motor Company has a long history of learning that lesson the hard way. Instead, what you need to do is find ways to ask yourselves, what are the things that we can't control? What are the things that we have absolutely no influence over? How might they come together and rearrange the world as we know it? And that's where you start to look at the social, the technological, the economic, the environmental, political. Only after you've explored that might you ask, what might that mean for the industry, my community, my school, my family? And only after you've fully explored all of those do you even bother to say, what does that mean for me? So it's a reverse approach to how you handle this. So when you think about the future and you're looking at these stories, they can create a lot of anxiety because most of us aren't comfortable dealing with the unknown. But you don't ever have to be a victim to the future, because the first part of creating the future that's most desirable for you is exploring it. I mean, you actually have the ability to put together the factors that's most suited for your ideal condition. So I want to end with my fifth and final confession. I love my job, but I don't always appreciate the work. A couple years ago, I was at a TED conference in California, and I had the occasion to meet Seth Godin, the very prolific author, brand guy. And he looked at my name tag, which is like the size of a small billboard, and he goes, oh, you're the futurist for Ford Motor Company. You must be very frustrated. And I was like this, oh my God, can he smell it on me? How did he know? How did he know? And he said, well, you work for a very large organization. It's very bureaucratic, it's conservative, it's got a rich history. Change is going to be very hard for you. But if it wasn't hard work, then you'd be a volunteer. They wouldn't have to pay you. And so I share all of this with you today, is to remind you that when you're in those moments of struggle, when it's in hard work, that there may be a purpose. I have a job, a career, a life that I could never have dreamed of. And while I don't believe that anyone can predict the future, I do believe in destiny. And I believe I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. I just know that there are moments in my life that I question that. So if you're in that space right now and you're questioning, why am I here? What does this all mean? Where am I headed? Don't worry. You just haven't reached your destination. Thank you.